Hey guys. So today on this live stream, we're going to dive into the blues a little bit. We've kind of already been talking about the blues, but now we're going to talk about it a little bit more. And I had this idea from a comment that somebody left on the blues course that started. And so basically, they were saying there wasn't a deep enough dive into the theory for what they were wanting. So I decided to do maybe a little bit more advanced of a thing on today's live stream. So we're just kind of winging it and going with it, but we might be talking a little bit more about how to solo over the blues, the idea of the blues scale and why it works, and just how much the blues does or doesn't follow classical theory. And spoiler alert, it doesn't really. But you can kind of think of it in a way that sort of makes it work, at least with like why the chords are seventh chords. So we'll talk through that, what that means and everything. And I'll try to start from the beginning to give you guys a background if you don't have any background of the blues, and then quickly progress to that stuff. Okay, so first, if you've been following the U-Bass Blues course that I started, you already know what a 12-bar blues is. But if you haven't, I'll catch you up really quickly. So a bar of music in general, most of the time is going to be 4 beats. So when you think about beats, you're patting your foot, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's usually what we're calling a bar. There are exceptions where some songs are in 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, that kind of feel. But in general, we'll be playing in 4 for a while. And then there are other exceptions too, but those are more rare than playing in 3 or 6 and then playing in 4. Okay. So that being said, the 12-bar blues basically applies a pattern to 12 measures of music, right? And so we have a certain chord progression that fits over that. So if we were in the key of G, we have 8 notes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And our first note of those 8, we'll just call 1. Now that's not the fret. We're on the 3rd fret, so it has nothing to do with the frets. But if we're in the key of G, we're starting on a G note, and G is our 1. Then our next note in the scale is A. We're going to call that our 2 of the scale. Then B is our 3, C is our 4, D is our 5, and so on. So in the blues, we use patterns based around the 1, based around the 4, and based around the 5. So that's our 1 chord, that's our 4 chord, and this is our 5 chord. So I go into much more detail in the course, but I just want to give you this basic background so that we can build upon it pretty quickly. Hopefully you already know this stuff. Okay, so we can do a pattern starting on each one of those notes, and we can move the same pattern around as a geometric shape to those different things, right? And we can do that while the cat's meowing in the background. She wants to play. But she doesn't want to play bass, but she does want to play. So let's take a pattern. I'm just going to take one of those. How about this one? Now I'm going to take it around the 12-bar blues. Okay, so if you were watching, I did a pattern that was kind of based around a geometric square on the neck, and it was starting originally on our 1 note of the key, so that's the G. And then what I was doing for the rest of the pattern, basically you just want to compare it back to the first note. So where was I going within this pattern? Well, I went 2 strings up and 2 frets over. That's an octave, so I went from a low G to a high G. Then I went backwards 2 frets on the same string. And And that would be the flat 7. If for the theory people, for the people that don't have a background in this, don't worry about that. But basically, G is our 1. Then we're hopping back to an F. And then we're going to a D note. Okay, but the important thing isn't the note names. The important thing is looking at that pattern, right? So it's G, higher G, F, D, and then basically I'm just repeating that pattern with the specific rhythm. I just picked a rhythm, but basically we do that 4 times there. And that's our first 4 bars of the 12-bar blues. So now we're going to go to the next measure, measure 5. But this time we're going to move from our 1 of the scale. We're going to move our entire pattern to where it starts on the 4 of the scale. So what did we do? We moved the same fret 1 string thinner. So that means all of the notes of the pattern have to move 1 string thinner, but we're going to play the same frets. So first we have this. Now we go to our 4 chord, we have this. And we play it 2 times there, then we go back to our 1 chord and play our pattern 2 times there again. Now we're going to start on our 5 of the key we're in. So if you remember earlier, that was a D note. For the record, that's the 5th fret on the A string. So notice that everything moved 1 string thinner and then 2 frets over. So that means every note in the pattern is going to go 1 string thinner and 2 frets over. Not just the first note, but the whole pattern is moving to this new box. We're doing it 1 time there, then we're moving back to our 4 chord, doing it 1 time there, then back to our 1 chord, then up to our 5 chord to finish it out. So I'm going to count the measures so that you know what's going on here. Out of the 12-bar blues, the first 4 on the 1 chord, 2nd time, 3rd, 4th. Now we're going to go up to the 4 chord here, do it 2 times, 2nd time, back to the 1 chord. Now we're at the 8th bar, we're going to the 9th measure, we're going to go to the 5 chord, 4 chord, that's the 10th measure, and then the 1 chord, that's the 11th measure, and then for the last measure, we're going back to the 5 chord. So hopefully if you're watching this video, you've kind of already understand that much of the blues. So now let's talk about, with that particular bass line, when we're doing those patterns, first of all, let's ask some theory questions. Are we playing notes that are in the key of G major exclusively? And the answer is no. We're taking notes from quite different keys, right? And the way you can tell is if you play G major, basically when you play that scale, you will have an F sharp, but every other note will be natural. So you have G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G. But when we're playing that pattern, right away, we're taking away that F sharp and replacing it with an F. That's why it's the flat 7 of the key. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. But we subtract a fret from it, so that makes it the flat 7. So already we're technically not in the true key of G, even though we're saying we're in the key of G. Okay, we're saying that this whole idea is based around G, but it's technically not in the major scale. So you might go, oh, okay, well maybe, oh, we have a flat 7, but the other notes are major right now. So right now you could say we're in Mixolydian. If you have any theory background, that's a major scale with a flat 7. Right? But then when we move our pattern to the C chord, you'll see that we're already leaving that G Mixolydian when we go to the C, because look at this note right here. It's the flat 7 of the C, so it's a B flat note. Well, we didn't have any flats in the key of G, right? Now all of a sudden we have a flat 7 when we're playing over the G chord. Now we have a B flat. Well, that's in our original key of G, that's a flat 3. So all of a sudden we've got a flat 7 there and a flat 3 there. And it's like, that's kind of weird. They're not happening at the same time, so it almost feels like we switched key. Okay? And then when we go back to here, all of the notes in that D pattern are in the key. So we could still think, oh, well, maybe we're still in the key of G because we did that. So what on earth happened here theoretically, right? Well, it's really hard to explain. The blues kind of has its own slang, but here's kind of a way you can sort of justify it in the classical world. In classical theory, there are things called secondary dominants. Kind of like an unusual name. If you have no idea about theory, this is going to be bizarre. You might be in over your head on this one, so just make sure to stick with the beginner course if this is really confusing. But basically, a secondary dominant is where you might be in this key, but you want to pretend for a second that you're in the key of the next chord you're going to. So instead of saying we're in G major, we're going to pretend for a second we're instead in C major. Okay, so if we're in the key of C major, then that key would have an F natural. So it's like, oh, okay. So even though we're basing everything around a G, we're pretending to be in C for a second because that's where we're headed. Okay, it works for that one, but then once you get to C, the problem there is that you're not going to the same place, right? And yet we're still flatting the 7 on that chord. So the slang of the blues kind of ends up breaking classical theory, right? That's why blues and classical music almost never sounds like the same genre. There's maybe some rare occurrence where they found a way to use some of the notes in a classical song where it technically didn't break the theoretical concepts. It just used some really advanced stuff and just happened to create a bluesy sound for like a smidge. But in general, that bluesy sound kind of is it's why it's a different genre, right? It doesn't really follow the rules. So basically we can claim, oh, okay, maybe this is a secondary dominant of this chord, and that's why the G chord would have a flat 7. Okay, cool. But then once we get to the C, there's not really a reason for it because we're going back to the G chord afterwards. So the only thing we can really say is the blues is more of a pattern-based music. And so you can move that pattern, and it's almost like we're changing key each time we move. Now then, when you go to the 5 chord, we're actually back in the key of G completely. That's the only one that's using notes of the pattern that are actually all in the key of G. So ironically, when we're in the 1 chord, we're sort of using the notes of C. When we're on the C chord, we're sort of using the notes of F major, which is really strange. And then when you're on the notes of D, that's the only time you're actually able to use really the notes of G major entirely. So basically, if you know modes, it's like every single one of those was a Mixolydian mode. So it's sort of like, yeah, we're in the overarching key of G, but it's almost like we're playing in the key of C. Then when we get to the C chord, we're playing in the key of F. Then we go back to the key of C, but even though we're playing a G7 chord, then we go up to our D7, and that's the only time that it actually feels like we're in G major. And that's just if we're doing like the bass line things, like if we're doing this bass line, for instance, that's a 12-bar blues as well. But the only time there that we can really say it feels like G is while we're playing the D chord. Very weird, Very strange. It's like we're always playing in the key of the chord we're going to, or just its own thing when you're on the C chord. So it's better to not think of it that way at all. Let's just throw that idea of classical theory of the whole entire song staying in the same key out. But instead what we have is these patterns. Now, because these patterns aren't all in the same key, how do we solo over it? Right? So it's like you're playing something, like what scale do we use to solo over that? Do we use C Mixolydian? Well, that works fine until you get to the C chord and you're still playing a B, right? All of a sudden we need a B flat because we have a B flat once we go to that chord. So instead what kind of happens is there's a scale that works depending on when you play it. It works with each chord as long as you avoid certain notes over certain chords, right? And that's kind of where our minor pentatonic comes in, and you can even add a note to it and turn it into what's called the blues scale. And so what gives the blues its sound is actually this note that's not even in the minor pentatonic scale, that's between the fourth note of what would have been the major scale, the fourth note and the fifth note. We're adding a note that's not in any of the chords, right? But that's, we kind of use it in certain ways that sort of make it sound okay, even though it's technically not in the key at all. It's not in the chords at all, which is super weird. But it's a passing tone between the 4 and the 5, and we do go from the 5 to the 4. So we can use that note as a passing tone in a bass line even. We'll see. 5 chord. Right? We can use it really quickly to get from there. And then that kind of works because we're calling it a non-chord tone. In classical music, you have non-chord tones. They're just temporary ways to lead smoothly into another chord, and they don't always have to be in the key. So we can argue, oh, okay, it's a passing tone. But in the blues, it gets used for a lot more than that. Sometimes you can hang out on that note. Sometimes you can just go back and forth between these 3 notes in a row. And so it's like you're not completely ever hanging out on it for too long, but you can kind of get away with playing it anyway. So you can think of it as just, yeah, it's the blues scale and we get to play that note all the time, but you could also think of it as, in general, we're using it either in passing or to go up and then back to the same note. So we're not just going like, boom, boom, I'm randomly going to jump there, right? Because then it starts sounding really out. So even though the blues scale has what would be called a flat 5 or a sharp 4 of the key, it's kind of like you have to use it in certain contexts or it still sounds way too out, even for the blues, if you don't resolve it and don't do anything with it. So it's like, yes, the blues scale technically is the root, the flat 3, the 4, the sharp 4, flat 5, whichever you want to call it, then the 5, and then the flat 7, and then the root again. And you can keep it up. You can go further. And you can play it in different positions. But in the key of G, the blues scale would be a G, a B flat, which I know it's not in a G chord. So it's really weird because you're playing like a G dominant 7th chord, which has a B in it, but we're playing the B flat. Very strange, but it works. Okay, then you have a C sharp, also known as D flat, whichever one you want to call it. And then we have the D, then we have a F, and then you're back to G. So those are the notes. And if you look at the way I'm playing it, I'm going from my index finger to my pinky inside this grid. Then I'm going to the index finger, middle finger, ring finger, then index finger to ring finger. There are other ways to play it, but that's a very useful pattern. If I start on this G up here, 10th fret on the A string, we can use that for soloing because it's an octave higher. Okay, so that being said, when we're playing the blues scale, if somebody just learns that, you can solo over basically any blues song pretty much with the blues scale, and it should sound good. But there's still, if you don't understand kind of the way that extra note works, you can still make it sound bad. And if you hang out on a note over a chord that doesn't have that note, and you just really hang out on it too much and you don't have a direction that you're going in, it can still sound wrong even though you're playing the blues scale. And you're like, I thought the blues scale always sounded good. Well, there are blues licks that sound good within the scale. But notice very few of them hang out on that flat 5. It's more like they use it kind of tastefully to embellish the other notes. And those other notes are really just the notes of the minor pentatonic scale. So if you're trying to be like theoretical with it, because they're all dominant 7th chords, you would kind of want to avoid the B flat over the G chord, but you really don't have to. That one still sounds good for some reason. It kind of, if you're familiar with Jimi Hendrix, he likes a chord in like Purple Haze and other songs like that, and it's called a flat 9 chord. It's literally throwing, like in the G version of it would be playing your G7 chord, which is a G, a B, a D, an F, and then if you wanted to, you could play another G, but you don't have to. I think in his voicing, he's not using that other G. But then on top of all that, you're throwing in the B flat. So it never ends up low in the chord, making it muddy and really dissonant. It ends up higher up and creates this cool flavor on top. And so if you're trying to figure out what that flavor sounds like as a chord, think of Purple Haze. Dun, 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 you know, that kind of thing. Let's see. I realize it sounded like I was humming Foxy, but I'm really humming a part of Purple Haze when he starts singing. But yeah. So you have that, but then on top of all that, you have a B flat. Sorry, in E, it would be a different note. It'd be a G. We don't have enough notes on bass to play all those together, which is fine because it would sound kind of muddy on bass anyway. But it's that chord with this on top. That's the idea. So that's sort of the sound of the blues. You're creating this minor kind of sound with this note that's normally used as a passing tone, but now we're using it. We can bend into the note. We can hammer on and pull off out of the note. But you really don't want to just hang out on that note. So your solos or your bass lines that utilize that note should really be purposeful. It's moving somewhere. It's not just hanging out in one spot. So unfortunately, I couldn't get the loop pedal to work. I think my loop pedal is going bad. So I'm trying to figure out how I could get some sort of backing track or something that won't trigger a copyright issue that uses this this concept. I may have to do something silly like record myself playing and then play over the top of it and show you kind of what's going on with the solo. So let me do that real quick. This is going to be the silliest way to do it. I'm just going to record a bass line. I'm going to play it 2 times, and then I'm going to play it back and do that. So let's see. This is the silliest way to do it, but here we go. Okay, let me play that back and just see if that'll work for us. May not be able to hear it at all, but we'll see. Oh, the Bluetooth is working, so it's coming out of the speaker. Perfect. I didn't have to play so bright then. Okay, so I'm going to start it over, and I'm just going to solo over the top of it with the blues scale in this one octave. Okay, so let's talk about what I was doing, and then I'll kind of go back to it and play over it again. Basically, I was using 2 octaves of the blues scale because I wanted that note on top. That's just repeating that B flat. So it's the same notes that I was playing down here. I just wanted to continue it up. Right, if I have the harmonic, I can play all those notes. Okay, but basically, let me try to just play a solo. I almost did I think I quoted Spider-Man at the end. Here comes the Spider-Man. Anyway, I didn't mean to quote Spider-Man, but that's a song that kind of uses the blues scale to create the pattern that's going on, and then they kind of sing what could be a bass line as the melody. It's very interesting thing. Okay, but basically, when I'm over the G chord, I make sure to hang out. Like if I'm going to stop on a note, I'm not stopping out on the flat 5. I'm not stopping out on the 4 so much. I'm stopping on notes that are in that chord. So we're playing a G, a B, a D, and an F. Those are the notes that are in the chord. So I can play all of those, and then I can approach those notes kind of quickly with the other notes in the blues scale, and that's fine. So notice how anything that I did using that note or using notes that this note or these 2 notes, they were always leading to a note that's in the chord, and then I kind of hang out a little bit longer on that. Let me try to just do the 1 chord. I'll play that with this, and hopefully you can hear what I'm saying. Okay. Okay. So notice, like when I was hanging out, I was hanging out on a G there. When I was hanging out here, I was hanging out on a D note. Those are both notes in the chord. So it's kind of like I was using elements of the scale to lead me there, if that makes sense. And then over the C chord, our notes are C, E, G, and B flat. So now all of a sudden we can use that B flat a lot. We can use that C a lot. And then I like using the flat 5 in there to kind of hammer on, but then lead back to that note. So it's kind of like you're just going up a little bit, but then emphasizing the root of the chord when you get there. Let's see if you can hear that when we get there in the 12 bar while I'm soloing over it. Here we go. Now we're on the 5 chord. Okay. And then over the 5 chord, which is a D chord, you have a D note, an F sharp, which we don't have in the blues scale at all. Then you have that A note, also not in the blues scale. So you could add those notes in over that chord, but really you could also just make sure to center everything around D. So that's kind of what I end up doing. And then the 7 of D is C, so you can still get away with hanging out on the C as well, even though we're over a D7 chord at that point. So I'm kind of just leading to chord tones, notes that are in the chord that I'm on in the bass line or that the guitar player is playing along. And they would be doing that whole chord, right? That's the 1 chord. They go to the 4 chord, then 1 chord, then the 5 chord, 4 chord, 1 chord, and then they end on the 5 chord, right? So they're like doing some sort of strum pattern with those chords. So I try to use the scale to lead me into those notes, unless I want to create like a feeling of tension where you're just like trying to get that emotional like across where it's like it's not supposed to sound nice. Then I might hang out on that flat 5, right? You're creating that tension, but then at some point you're resolving it to a note that's in the chord or to G, so that it just like feels nice. So I'm just gonna like solo in this little box. And yeah, I'm kind of breaking my grid here because when you get closer together on the frets, it's just a little too cramped. So once I get up to here, I might break the grid a little bit, but you can still use the grid there as long as your fingers will let you. Okay, let's try it. Okay, so there, I kind of over the 4 chord, I just went or something like that. And so if you notice, I'm going up to that flat 5, but I'm coming back to that 4, which is literally the root of the chord we're on. The C is literally the root of the chord we're on. So I'm just sort of embellishing the C, and then I'm kind of stopping on the B flat. So it's kind of like when you're playing the C7 chord, it's almost like I'm accenting the 7th of that chord. So that being said, hopefully that gives you an idea into sort of theoretically what's going on. So it's like the blues scale, yes, it's a full scale, but depending on what chord you're on, you want to de-emphasize certain notes and emphasize other ones. Yes, you can still play all of the notes over them technically, but certain things will sound better. Another thing that I like to do when I play the blues is just over the 5 chord, just over the D chord, I like to scoop from that F note into the F sharp, which is not in the blues scale, but it is in the D chord. So that's like one exception I'll make where I'm playing all blues scale. Then I'll go, when I go to the D chord, I kind of scoop in to the F sharp, and that gives me a note that's not in the blues scale technically, but that sounds good because it's in the chord. And then I'll do over the C chord just more of that, and finally resolving it back to G. So that's just things that kind of happen. That's the cat telling me it's about time to end the stream. So I'm about to go, but I just want to do one more little playthrough and see if you can catch any of these things. hopefully that gives you some ideas of how to use the blues scale over the 12-bar blues if you're trying to solo. You can also use it within bass lines. There are a lot of songs that kind of make up their pattern around the blues scale instead of just that box. So that was a thing I just made up that kind of exclusively used the blues scale. Just happened to, with the exception of maybe over the D chord, I used one note that wasn't in there. But yeah, try out these ideas, kind of get that idea of it's a minor pentatonic with the extra note thrown in between the fourth and the fifth, which is not the fourth and fifth note of the minor pentatonic, but it's like the fourth and fifth note of either a minor scale or a major scale. It'll be the same fourth and fifth if you start on the same roots. If you're doing G major, C is your 4, D is your 5, we're adding the note in between. Okay. And if you don't know the minor pentatonic scale to know which notes I'm saying and which notes I'm not, just go back in this video and you'll at least be able to do it in G. And then that finger pattern that you'll get from doing it in G is movable. So you can move that around to other keys, and you don't technically have to know the notes you're playing as long as you know where your root note is when you're starting a pattern. So that's a way to kind of hack the blues and then go back and add this theory in so you know what you're actually doing. So that way you can move out of your little boxes and walk around a little bit more. So that's kind of the goal, and that's kind of the goal with this blues course, is to get you to first learn the patterns and then learn how to connect the patterns using chromatic walks and using walks just from the scale. And we'll get there. Right now, only the second lesson is out. So just be patient. I'll get those out to you. But thank y'all for hanging out tonight. I appreciate you, and I hope you have a good day. I will see you on the next video. I'll have another one coming out this month, and then I'll have a live stream, hopefully the first Thursday of next month. Sometimes I can't always do the first Thursday, and I'll end up doing the second Thursday instead. But thank y'all for hanging out. I'll see y'all next time. I'm going to play out with one that I didn't play coming into it this time, but it's technically still a blues song. Still a 12-bar. All right, thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time.